Dun, 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 dun. I had a student last semester say that she almost protested that we were watching Jaws. She'd never seen the movie before and assumed that it was just a horror movie, blood and guts, a waste of her time. But for whatever reason, she didn't get the courage to ask me to see if I could assign another movie, and decided to watch it, and came to class and said, I've got to apologize because I almost said, how dare you assign this movie? Because my assumptions were it was something far worse than it really was, and she said she actually enjoyed the movie and realized that it was more of a psychological thriller than it was a gory movie. Really, I mean, if you think about it, those of you who have now watched it realize that the movie doesn't really have much blood and gore. There's a couple shocker moments at the beginning and midway through, and really at the end is the only time you see Jaws chomp on somebody. But nonetheless, it is a very interesting movie. It's got a very powerful visual presence. It's got a unique story to it. The story breaks down perfectly as a 3-act structure. And the acting in it, I think, goes well. So I use it. I mean, there are other movies that I could use from this era, but I like it because it kind of, it definitely reflects a culture in America from its era. I mean, you watch it and it is the spitting image of 1975. And to a certain degree, not everybody, 1975 dealt with sharks, but you could see how people were dealing with things, how people dressed, how people acted, and we can definitely see how it influenced our perceptions even of sharks. I mean, if you think about Discovery Channel's Shark Week that began in the 90s, they were trying to reprogram us that not all sharks are bad, and that shark attacks are rare, and that you can go in the water, and for the most part, you're going to be okay. I mean, a lot of that has to do with the fact that we were scared to death of Jaws, the movie. Now, the sequels to follow, don't waste your time. Jaws 2 is basically like Jaws 1, but just with a different cast. Jaws 3D, if you remember that, it came out, was a gimmick to make a movie in 3D. And Jaws 4, I don't even know what that one's about. I don't think I even saw it. It's just unfortunate movie. It's kind of like Superman 4. What? That movie was horrible. But anyways, this one works. This one stands out. This one was nominated for a Best Picture. This one, actually, let's see here. I've got my notes here. This one actually was, it won Best Editing, Best Sound, and Best Original Score, which I would completely concur with. John Williams' soundtrack with the cello and very minimalistic, but yet just overpowering. Dun 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 dun. I mean, come on, it's phenomenal. We know what that is. Most people, even if they haven't seen the movie, know when you go dun what you're talking about. The stinking shark is on the attack. But nonetheless, the movie works on many different levels. Let's see if there's anything else there I want to touch upon. Well, what I want you to do for your final, I talked about it in the beginning, is this. Can we see this movie as the culmination of filmmaking to date? Now, there are a couple other things that will come along. We just don't have time in this class to talk about. The big independent film scene that began in the 80s and 90s, and then the digital revolution, 90s and on through now. Those are more or less, if you look at the independent scene, just kind of like more or less an extension of European filmmaking to some extent. And then the digital revolution is just more or less a better way of visually manipulating what we've seen. But if you think about film as a whole, as a narrative art form, the way that we edit, the way that we shoot it, the way that we light it, the way that we tell stories through it. It hasn't changed much from 1975 on. And I don't know if 1975 is a perfect date to pick it, but if you think about all the different developments in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, can we say that here in the 60s and particularly in the 70s, it all kind of comes together, and it is what it is. It is the film industry that we know today and that we love today. Now you might say, well, Casablanca stands out. Doesn't seem to be much in the way of telling us stories, but think about it. Casablanca is still set for the most part, or shot on not on location, on a set in a controlled environment. The new wave really pushes the envelope for having movies that are shot on location. Well, okay, can't we just say that the Beatles' Hard Day's Night might be the culmination? But it has elements of what we saw up to this point, but it was still in black and white, and it was getting close to it. So there are different ways you can argue this, but really what I want to say, I'm sorry it's late at night here, I'm losing my train of thought. Really what I want to say is I want you to just use this as a vehicle for discussion in your paper. Could we see that Jaws is influenced by a lot of the movies that we saw? Feel free to say, I don't know if I necessarily agree with this. I could see this movie influencing it. I could see Orson Welles. I could see D.W. Griffith. But I don't know if I completely agree with that idea that this is a culmination. But nonetheless, I want you to use this final paper and this question as a vehicle to pull in all the various aspects that we have looked at over the last 7 weeks and impress me with your knowledge. This is going to be an opportunity for you to use the right terms, to perhaps even refer to the book a little bit so I know that you've read it. But I want you to at least compare it to 3 movies that we have watched in this class. So compare it and say, I saw this element from Citizen Kane, I saw this element from Breathless, I saw this element from Casablanca, whatever movie you choose. And talk about that and tell me how those techniques perhaps influence Spielberg. And I want you to make sure you use and define the various terms that we discuss in class or that you've read in your book. And I also want you to look at it culturally and discuss how this movie reflects its time and why you think it was so popular. And then the last couple ideas is I want you to discuss why the film school generation was so attracted to more traditional storytelling. That was a part I didn't really touch on as much, but you think about the new wave was all about breaking the forms that had developed in Hollywood. Why did this generation of film makers embrace the more traditional way of telling a story, but yet was influenced by some of the non-traditional? And then finally, I want you to use at least 5 outside sources that are properly cited in your text, as well as a works cited. So it's a big paper, 4 to 5 pages. It's your final paper. If you have any questions, you can email me. I really want you to kind of just pull it all together for me, all right? Obviously, I want you to watch the movie Jaws as well. You're going to need to do that. You should be able to find this anywhere. It's out there, but make sure it is Jaws, the original movie. So I want to thank you guys for your time over the last 8 weeks, 7 weeks now. And look to see when this is due. I'll have that posted probably Tuesday. And thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it. I wish I could have met all of you. But thank you for your patience. Thank you for your prayers for my family in this very difficult time. And I do hope you all have a Merry Christmas. Thank you very much.